This is the Comics Alternative, on location and talking with creators at Small Press Expo 2016, Part 3. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Comics Alternative on Location. I'm Derek, one of the two guys with PhDs talking about comics. And today we have the last of our 3 on-location interview shows from Small Press Expo 2016. But before we get to those conversations, I want to let all of you know that this episode of the Comics Alternative on Location is brought to you by the wonderful folks at Discount Comic Book Service. Go to their website, dcbservice.com, for all of your comics pre-ordering needs. There, you're going to find all DC, Marvel, Image, and Dark Horse titles at 40% off of the cover price if you pre-order. For all of the other publishers, you'll find that those discounts are 20 to 35% off of the cover price. And every single month, you're going to find some wonderful specials. Sometimes those specials will be at 45% off of the cover price, sometimes at 50% off of the cover, but often you can find discounts that are more impressive than that. And if you go to their website right now, dcbservice.com, you'll find discounts on books by some of the creators that I'm going to be talking to on this episode. For instance, you can find Julia Gfrörer's Laid Waste at 35% off of the cover price, as well as Joshua Cotter's Not Away at 35% off cover. You can't beat the discounts at Discount Comic Book Service. Check out their website, dcbservice.com. They'll take care of all of your comics pre-ordering needs. And after you do get your books there, please be sure to send them an email and tell them that the two guys with PhDs sent you. This is the last of our 3-part on-location interview series of conversations that I had with a variety of creators at Small Press Expo 2016. And on this episode, you're going to hear brief interviews with Theora Kvitka, Sophie Goldstein, Melanie Gillman, Carolyn Nowak, Zack Soto, Jarod Roselló, Kevin Budnik, Andrea Tsurumi, Julia Gfrörer, and Joshua Cotter. A quick word on the sound quality of some of these interview segments, especially those toward the end of today's show. Unbeknownst to me, at the time of the recording of the last few interviews that I was doing on that Sunday of SPX, the name of the person that I'm introducing was cut off. In other words, when I started to record, the recorder itself didn't start picking up my voice until a beat or so after I introduced the person and started to talk with them. But if you overlook that, I think that these are some really good conversations. I'm talking with Theora Kvitka. I spoke with her and actually met her for the first time last year at SPX. Theora, how things going this year?
Going really well. I'm happy to be back.
Now, you and I, earlier this morning, we were in the lobby of the hotel talking about the changes, the things that you've been doing, you starting school, and new projects that you have going on. But that was telling me, and I'd like for you to share some of this with our listeners as well. So what's been going on with you since last year when we talked?
Well, it's been a really productive year, and I put out in April I put out a new mini-comic called Commuter Naps about people taking naps in weird places on their way to work. And then I did a zine series in March, starting in March. It was a 4-part zine series about living at home in Phoenix with my parents and sort of reflecting on having been away from my hometown for 10 years. And then in February, I started a webcomic called Urbanity Planet, which the premise is that Earth has gotten too expensive to live on, so recent college grads had to move to a new planet in order to be able to afford rent.
Okay, so this is your first foray into webcomics?
That's right, yeah.
Now, why the decision to, let's say, forego the pamphlet or the mini-comic format and try your hand at webcomics?
Well, I was interested in, first of all, experimenting with something, and I think webcomics can be a little bit more just a space to experiment, and they don't need to be as formal as what I might put into a mini comic. And also just trying to find my audience online and develop more of a readership as well. Yeah.
Now, I should mention, you were telling me this in the lobby this morning, that the webcomic is an ongoing storyline, right? It's not just a series of like done-in-one strips.
That's right. Yeah, there are characters that maintain consistency, and there are sort of overall story arcs, although I still don't really have a full idea of where the series is going, and I'm kind of developing it like in chunks of maybe like 2 months or 3 months at a time. Yeah.
You know, that's one of the things I think makes webcomics stand out, is that the creator doesn't necessarily have an endpoint or maybe even an idea where things are going over the next month or two. And then as the story evolves, that's what it becomes. And is that something you're learning from doing this webcomic?
Absolutely, yeah. And I think there are advantages to that and also disadvantages. Like, I am imagining at some point in the future I'll be like, oh darn, I wish I had introduced that theme or that character way back then so that now it would make sense later. But I think that's part of the learning process and part of just improving your craft as a storyteller.
You know, some webcomic creators, I think, have an end goal of a hard copy eventually, that the webcomic is one platform, but then that can lead to print. Now, is that something that you've given thought to at all, or are you just wanting to explore the web platform and that's it?
A little bit. I did make a zine of all the comics for this show, and I'd love to just use that as a way to share the story to people who aren't interested in reading things online. But as far as a book or making it into a mini comic, I haven't really thought that far yet.
Okay. Yeah. Now, we haven't even talked about where our listeners can find this webcomic. What's the URL?
Yes, it's called Urbanity Planet, and you can find it on Tumblr at urbanityplanet.tumblr.com.
Okay, so that's where they can check you out. And to check out your other works, your website?
Is theorakvitka.com.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thanks a lot, and nice talking to you again. Good luck with the remainder of the day.
Thank you very much. Great to talk to you, too.
In the past, we've talked to Sophie Goldstein on the podcast. I think maybe a total of 3 times. We had a longer one-on-one conversation, and then I've talked to you at a couple of different cons. Sophie, how are you doing at SPX 2016?
I'm doing great. SPX has always been one of my favorite shows, and it continues to astound every year, so I'm very happy to be here.
Now, this year, you are debuting the 3rd of your House of Women trilogy, right?
That's correct.
And so tell us a little bit about the wrap-up of the story, the process of, I guess it's completion, and everything that went into this.
Well, graphic novels are hard, so it's a real struggle, especially because I started the book in 2013. And I know in the grand scheme of things, 3 years is not a super long time to be working on a graphic novel, but it's definitely the longest that I've worked on a project. And the break between issue 1 and issue 2 was 2 years. So getting back into it for the issue 2 took a while. And then with issue 3, I was still in the mindset, so I was not, it went pretty smoothly from finishing issue 2 to starting to work on issue 3. But, that last mile of the marathon is really, really hard. But I feel like issue 3, like the art leveled up even from issue 1 and issue 2. And I don't think of myself as being a great artist. I feel like my strength is generally in writing and not in art. So to feel proud of something, doing something on a visual level is unique for me. And I feel really good about the book and very relieved that it is complete.
Now, you were talking about when you started that. Now, at what point had you started to work on the oven in the course of House of Women?
After I graduated from the Center for Cartoon Studies, my friend started an anthology series called Maple Key Comics, and she invited me to do a comic for that, and the concept was that it would be serialized in the 6 issues. I graduated in 2013, so that was right after I finished House of Women that I did the oven, and the idea with the oven is it was 12 to 14 pages every 2 months because she's publishing it in 1 year, so one issue every 2 months. And I wanted a story that, because I wanted to pick up other freelance and do other projects that I felt like was not going to be so visually elaborate that I could do it and work on other stuff as well. And I wrote the whole script ahead of time, which I highly recommend. And it was, visually it's very different from House of Women. It's a lot simpler and more graphic, and it just kind of came out pretty easily. Like, House of Women is very laborious. There's a lot of referencing a lot of Japanese prints and Art Nouveau and visual research to really get a distinctive style. And The Oven, in contrast, is just I just took out as much detail as I could while still having enough to communicate. And I actually forget what the original question was.
Well, I was wondering if the work on The Oven had gotten in the way at any point House of Women.
No, it didn't get in the way at all. I just wasn't working on House of Women 2, and I did the first one, and it was my thesis project for CCS, and the thesis projects are hard. It was a lot of work, and it wasn't certain at that point that I would finish it after I graduated. But when I got the response, when people responded positively to it, that was the thing that really drove me. I was like, okay, this is worth finishing the story, which is why there's a big break between the first issue and the second issue. But basically, after I graduated, I just shoved it in a closet and worked on a bunch of other stuff and didn't think about it for, a year and a half, which I would not recommend if you haven't finished the script, because coming back to it and getting back into it was tough. It was like a polar bear swim.
Now, you said a second ago that you feel that you're better at storytelling than at illustration. Have you considered writing and then doing more work where others do the illustration work?
I have considered it, and I'm very open to it. Anyone out there who's listening to this. As someone who draws comics, I know how much work it is, and the writing is tough. Nobody's going to contest that. But drawing, just in terms of sheer time commitment and skill and effort, I just feel like it's a lot to ask for someone to kind of enroll themselves in your vision and do your work instead of doing whatever they might be doing on their own. So I've been very hesitant to reach out for collaborations. But it is something that I want to do in the future, because I have A, more ideas that I can possibly draw, and B, I have ideas that I'm not a good enough artist for on a technical, I can't do 3-point perspective. And I have comics where I would love to do architectural elements and things that are visually complicated, but I just don't want to draw them, and I know what kind of work my art serves. But my interest in storytelling is wider than that. So someday, yes, I would love to do that.
I know you just finished up House of Women. Are you currently working on something or have ideas for your next project?
Yeah, I'm right now my co-writer on the webcomic Darwin Carmichael is Going to Hell, Jen Jordan. We're working on a follow-up project, not in the same world, but tonally very similar. And we are about 60-70% through the first draft of that. So assuming she's a full-time PhD student and teacher, but assuming that we get that done in a timely manner, then that will probably be the next project. And failing that, I do have a lot of other ideas, but nothing really ready to go out the door yet, which is scary. It's scary to think, there's going to be this empty period where nobody's going to get anything from me, and then they'll forget about me, and then I'll just die. But no. So I do have other stuff, but nothing no definite distinct thing that I can point to at this point.
Well, this new project with Jen, is this going to begin as a webcomic?
Yeah, we're definitely thinking about going back into doing a webcomic because we miss it. There's something about the community of webcomics and the immediate feedback that you get. that can be really rewarding and aggravating and exciting and terrible, and just like, and being in the regular print publishing cycle is very different from that. So, and there's things that exist now that didn't when we were doing. There's no Patreon. There was no Patreon when we were originally doing webcomics, so I'm interested in kind of seeing the different ways to, and I know this word sounds awful, monetize comics, but I think there's ways to make webcomics sustainable now that didn't exist before, and the comic that we're writing is definitely a webcomic friendly. Like, the audience for that, I think, that we had for Dark Chronicle would respond well to this work. So yeah, I think a webcomic is how we're planning on it, unless some unforeseen thing happens, like some publishers, like, here's $1 billion, do not show anyone. And we'll be like, okay, we'll take that.
So if people want to find out more about your work, House of Women and otherwise, your web address is? redinkradio.com. So that's how they can find out about you and get in touch with you.
Absolutely. And also, I am the first Sophie Goldstein that shows up on a Google search, so I'm easy to find.
Well, it's always a pleasure talking with you, Sophie. I'm glad I got to do so again this year at SPX. I hope the rest of the day goes well for you.
Thank you so much.
Melanie Gillman, she is the artist behind As the Crow Flies, which was nominated for an Ignatz Award this year. Melanie, how has the convention been going for you?
Oh, it's been wonderful. SPX is a great show every year. We have, lots of great crowds. It was packed yesterday, and people are really excited about, especially, indie comics, comics by women and femme creators, and queer comics especially, which is kind of the intersection of audiences that my work tends to appeal to. So it's been really great.
Now, let me see. As the Crow Flies was nominated, it wasn't in the online category. It was for which one?
It was for Outstanding Comic, and I'd have to look at the list again to check, but that's actually pretty rare. Usually webcomics tend to get kind of limited to the webcomics section, so the fact that we have a webcomic in the non-webcomics section is pretty unusual for comics awards, which I was really excited about.
Yeah, you weren't shoved in the ghetto.
I hate to call it the ghetto, but yes. Yeah.
Well, as I was telling you before I turned the mic on, I really wish that I had known about your webcomic before now, because this would have been perfect for a webcomic series. Now, we're going to talk about As the Crow Flies on a regular review show in the coming days, but I was just bowled away by this story, and I was wondering, for those of our listeners who may not be familiar with it, how would you establish the premise?
So As the Crow Flies is a story about a group of queer and trans teenagers who meet at a Christian youth backpacking camp. And the protagonist, her name is Charlie. She's a gender-questioning young 13-year-old black girl who is stuck in what ends up being an all-white Christian youth camp. And she was not expecting it to be all-white when she first went into this. So she ends up dealing with a lot of situations where the well-meaning camp, which promotes itself as a feminist camp, really fails her in terms of intersectional feminist theory. So she has to deal with a lot of especially racism and homophobia in the course of this camp. And she meets a friend there named Sydney, who is a trans girl, 12 years old, and she's dealing with a lot of transphobia from this camp. So the two of them end up bonding kind of over their shared outsiderness in this camp and the need to find a community where they can feel safe and talk to each other and sort of watch each other's backs throughout. So the story ends up being a lot about the friendship between these two girls and how they talk about these issues, how they deal with these kind of subtle microaggressions that are happening to them over the course of the camp. And it's also I draw everything in colored pencils, so I spend a lot of time, really bringing out I try to do justice to the lushness of the Rocky Mountain environment that these kids are moving through, and it's all traditional media. It's up online. It's about 275 pages right now in the webcomics version, and there will be a print version eventually coming out, probably next year through Iron Circus Comics.
And in fact, I was just talking with Spike at Iron Comics, so that's good to know. I didn't know. I know that you announced on your site that there's going to be a print version, but this is good to know. So, you mentioned that you do all of this in colored pencils. One of the first things that struck me about As the Crow Flies is the color and is the lushness of the art, because it's usually not something that you see on a webcomic. Most times it is computer generated in one form or another, but you took a different route, which had me wonder. I mean, when I first started reading this, I thought, okay, so this is a web version of something that's already out in print, but I was wrong.
Nah, it's not out in print just yet, but it will be in the future. But yeah, it's traditional media, so I draw everything by hand and then scan it in and post it online. And it's unusual in webcomics, especially colored pencil, because it's a very labor-intensive medium. It takes me about 8 to 12 hours per page to actually draw them. So you don't see that too often in, especially webcomics, but also in print comics, because digital coloring is so much faster and easier than traditional media in a lot of cases. But there's a few, stuck in the mud folks who are still buried in our ways of traditional media.
And you've been doing As the Crow Flies for quite a while now, right?
Yes, I started it in 2012. Actually, it was part of my senior thesis when I was in the MFA program at the Center for Cartoon Studies. I did the first chapter while I was out there, graduated, got my MFA, and then I've been continuing it ever since.
Now, I see at your table you also have comic or pamphlet, or I guess we can call them mini comics as well. And these did not originally appear as webcomics?
No, most of my mini comics are print only. I've got one comic called Toxoplasmosis, which is a horror comic about the kind of brain parasites that you get from cats. That's a fun one. I also have autobio comics like Non-Binary, which is a comic that I did about the process of coming out as non-binary. So asking people to use they pronouns for you, trying to explain this to cisgender family members and friends who've never heard of this before, things like that. And I also have a little bit of erotica. I do both kids comics and erotica, so I have a genderqueer porn comic called Rappers.
So what are some, maybe it's wrong to ask it this way, but whether you prefer working on the online format or in the hard copy, do you have a preference one way or another? Does one give you something that the other one doesn't? Are you okay in both worlds?
I like both worlds, honestly, and I think that the two overlap a whole lot, because a lot of times if I put a comic up online, I'm also thinking about it in terms of the eventual print edition of this. I have very few comics that are only ever going to exist in online form. But yeah, the different mediums accomplish different things. You build different types of audiences for both of them, because there are some people who prefer to read comics online and others that prefer to read them in print. And there's no reason that you can't be in both worlds, and that's what most cartoonists, especially the younger generation, is doing these days.
So now the URL to As the Crow Flies, if our listeners want to check it out, is?
MelanieGillman.com, which is MELANIEGILLMAN.com.
And they can also find your other comics there as well?
A few of them, yes.
Okay. Well, Melanie, I want to thank you for talking with me, and I love the work. I look forward to the hard copy of this, and good luck with the rest of the comic.
Awesome. Thank you for having me.
The winner of the 2016 Ignatz Award for Outstanding Mini-Comic is Carolyn Nowak for her book Radishes. And in fact, I'm standing with Carolyn right now. Carolyn, congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Now, I have to say, I was not aware of your comics before I went through the Ignatz list. And we're doing this year as we did last year. We're devoting an episode to talk about all the nominees. And so this was my introduction to your work. And I have to say, after reading it, I thought, this is one of those creators that I wish I'd known at before. So tell me more about your work in addition to Radishes.
It's funny that you should ask that, because I don't have that much work besides this. I've done like a few mini comics here and there, but wow, it's hard to describe your own work, so I'm just like struggling right now. It's all very much along the same vein as Radishes, where it's like a made-up sort of world, whether it be like sci-fi or fantasy, and how the characters explore that context. But I think Radishes is like my fourth book, my fourth mini comic. Yeah.
For our audience who haven't seen Radishes yet, and I hope that they do, how would you set this up for them?
Oh my gosh. Well, my wonderful friend Carta wrote me this beautiful summary because I suck at summaries, so here we go. Two friends skip school to visit a magical outdoor mall. Real-life experiences blend with fantasy as they try to act adult, navigate creeps, and come face-to-face with themselves.
Well, I think that sums it up quite well.
I know. She did a really good job.
And the thing that I found particularly interesting about this, and I guess it's the story's crescendo, this is toward the end, and we won't give anything away, but this is when they encounter some kind of, I guess we could call it a fantastical vending machine.
Yeah.
And it's what happens to them while they're there. And that's how the story ends.
Yep.
Now let me ask you, after I read the end of Radishes, I couldn't help but think, there's got to be more, and I want there to be more. Do you have any plans on following up these characters?
I don't have any concrete plans, but people keep saying that to me, so maybe I should. I really, honestly, I'm not a person with any plans whatsoever.
Really, because I was curious when I saw this, I thought, she has to be thinking, because of the way that you develop these characters, the characters are so fleshed out, or teased at least to a point. In other words, there's got to be more information about them in subsequent issues. She had to have this in a larger plan, but you're saying not as of yet?
No plan at all. I mean, I don't think the length of the story matters. I think you should always try to flesh out your characters as much as possible. You know, make them their own, and I mean, don't go crazy, but but yeah. No plans beyond this. I mean, I wrote this really quickly. Actually, Sam Bosman just walked by, and I wrote it after I took a fantasy writing workshop with him. It was like totally directly inspired by that amazing workshop. And I don't know, I just like wrote it really quickly. I don't know what I'm trying to say here. Sorry.
Well, I mean, are you currently working on something right now?
I'm actually working on a couple of licensed properties right now, just like doing interior art for a couple books. I worked on Lumberjanes before, and I'm doing that right now again. I'm doing some future issues, and I'm also working on SpongeBob, which is a blast. SpongeBob comics, not the show. And when those things finish up, when I make a little bit of money with those things, I'll sit down and try to think of something for myself.
Well, the Ignatz win should give you quite a bit more attention.
Yeah, I'm hoping. I hope so.
We should also mention that your story, Girl Town, appeared in, issue number 6 of Irene, the anthology?
Yes, it did. It was so nice to be invited by Dakota and Andy to participate in Irene, because I think it's a super solid anthology.
Yeah, in fact, I was just talking with Dakota earlier today that I find it's a shame that more people don't know about this anthology, or at least in the United States. I don't know how it is in Canada, but when I ask people if they know about Irene, they say, "Who's that?"
Who's that? No, someone came up and they were like, "Oh, is this the book you've been working on?" I was like, no, like, no, it's not.
Well, if our listeners wanted to find out more about your comics, Radishes and otherwise, how would they do so? What is your website?
My website is carolyncnowak.com. I mean, you can just Google me if you feel like it, and it should be like the first thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
They should definitely check out your work, especially Radishes, the winner for the mini comic category. Congratulations again, and I hope the rest of SPX goes well for you.
Thank you so much.
Next table, talking with Zack Soto, who, can we call you the mastermind behind Study Group?
That sounds perfect. I'm definitely the mastermind.
Now, you and I have corresponded a number of times in the past, but this is the first time that we've met one another.
I believe that is correct.
So I know that you actually exist and vice versa, right? That we're not figments.
I'm a human person, a meat-filled apparatus operating here in SPX.
Yeah. Now, we've talked about Study Group comics on a variety of different podcast episodes. We've talked about your hard copy comics, but we've also talked about the web comics that are available through Study Group. I know in particular, just recently we discussed Tyler Landry's Vile, and the first issue, but the second issue came out just recently, correct?
Yeah, it's actually a show debut. Oh. I got them from the printer on Monday, so put them in my luggage with me to come over here. So
it's brand spanking new. Yeah. We also, I know we've talked about It Will All Hurt on our webcomic show, as well as The Secret Voice, which is your own.
Correct. That's my ongoing epic fantasy sort of hybrid epic fantasy mixed with sort of a Fort Thunder and also sort of a Eurocomics flair, I guess, or appreciation. I don't know.
And what you're going to continue doing is publishing that on the web and then coming out with hard copy issues once you get enough.
Correct. So I've got 3 issues out so far. It's all up online on studygroupcomics.com. And then I'm working on issue 4 at the moment. At some point I will start serializing it online, and then there will be a print version of that issue. And then those 4 issues, more or less, will make a book, like book 1. So I'll figure that out, when it comes time to figure that out.
So your plans for The Secret Voice are for the long haul?
Correct. Yeah, well, I've been doing it off and on for about 10 years. So, yeah, it's a long haul already, really. Yeah, I plan to keep... I'd say there's if these 4 issues are a book, there's at least 2 books. I'd say there's probably 2 books worth of stuff that needs to happen before I can safely put it to bed.
Yeah, and another one of your comics that is available online and then coming out issue by issue in hard copy is Francois Villeneuve. Is that how you pronounce his name?
Vigneault.
Vigneault's Titan, which we really like as well.
Yeah, Titan is great. Titan is probably the coolest romance comic / labor issues comic that you will see set in space. And Francois is actually busy working on the 4th issue as we speak. He could not come to SPX because he needs to hit his deadline. So
good. So he's being a good little artist.
Yeah, totally. No, well, he actually, I was being a bad publisher in that I was begging him to come because I don't see him anymore because he lives in Montreal. But I was like, come on, let's hang out. We'll have a good time. And then he's like, well, I don't know. I should probably try to finish this book, right? And I was like, oh, yeah, I guess that's true. So that should actually be out for Cab in November.
Okay.
So their issue 4 will be out for Cab.
And a number of your other titles we discussed recently when we did our publisher spotlight on alternative comics and the other publishers in the co-op.
Right.
Now I'm wondering, this has been going on, they've done this for what, a little over a year now with the co-op?
About a year and a little tiny bit of change, I think, yeah.
Now how has that changed the kind of attention you guys get at Study Group?
I think it's good. It's, as far as Diamond goes, we're very small potatoes, I have rarely broken 1,000 copies of any one thing through Diamond for any of my personal titles. But that said, it's like you get a big bulk of sales to people that you wouldn't have necessarily reached. Like all the Android's Dungeons who might in the various spots of that might not carry a full range of indie comics or whatever. They see it in Diamond, they'll be like, oh yeah, cool, I'll get one of these, whatever, if they're into that. So yeah, it's been pretty cool on that level, just seeing that, and I definitely feel like I wouldn't say, like I said, I wouldn't say that we're big mega sellers or anything like that, but when I come to these shows, I have people go oh, that's been out, right? I've seen that, and so there's a little bit more recognition of the various books, I'd say, just on a certain amount. At least the people who pay attention have a better chance of getting them.
Do you think in terms of the print comics over the past couple of years that you've increased your output?
Yeah, we definitely made a bigger push in the last year or so, and that's been really cool. We've put out a lot. I was actually just talking about this with Francois. I was I was kind of griping about myself, or I was feeling kind of down on myself, I was what am I doing, and blah blah blah, and he's like, well, look at this list of books, and it's actually I can admit it's a very fun and chock full of goodness list for the last couple of years. So yeah, but right now I'm actually sort of feeling like I need to really double down on being a creator. And get Secret Voice done, and I'm working on another project too. So,
Well, what about the webcomic presence? Are you going to continue doing that, emphasizing that on your website, coming out with new titles?
Yes, definitely. Pretty much everything I do, I will probably end up serializing just because it's my site, and I might as well. And we're kind of in lurk mode right now, I guess. We only have a couple serials going on at the moment. We have Titan rolling and The Bloody Cardinal by Richard Sala, which is a crazy, awesome thing to have Richard on the site, because I've loved his stuff since I was a teenager. And we just had Half Track by Mason Dickerson, just wrapped up like a week or so ago. And I'm always looking for new stuff, but I haven't been focusing on building it right now. So it's just kind of chugging along. I do plan on introducing some more things coming up pretty soon, actually. So.
And when can we expect the next issue of Study Group Magazine?
Well, Study Group Magazine number 4 is out at the show.
Because I didn't even see 4 next to it, but 3, I know the 3D issue. So 4 is out. Wow, that's news to me.
Yeah, it's right here. And it actually came out through Diamond a couple weeks ago. But it's a show debut. So we have it's an adventure comics theme, and we mimic some of the like Dragon magazine kind of aesthetics on the outside, but there's a lot of role-playing game intersection of role-playing games and comics and adventure comics, and there's different articles. James Romberger did a cool article about like Kirby's influences, like Hal Foster and stuff like that. And then there's Dylan Horrocks did a really big piece of sort of like his history with role-playing games, but also like the history of role-playing games, and a bunch of great comics. Lark Pian, Patrick Crotty, Levon Jahanian, who did the cover also, and the deluxe edition comes with a Game Master screen for actual like tabletop role-playing that Ben Mara designed the front of and I did the back of. And it also comes with the Quick Start Guide. It's a playable role-playing game by Levon, who did the cover.
So a game can actually be played with the deluxe edition.
Correct. Yeah. And if you go through our archives, it's Danger Country, which is one of our original strips that we started. I don't know, however many years ago now. He was one of the original guys on the website. So he's in animation now mainly, but still a very talented cartoonist. So.
And the website is studygroupcomics.com.
That's it. You got it.
Well, Zack, I want to thank you for taking the time and talking with me, and good luck with the comics in the months and years to come.
Thank you, sir.
Roselló, he is the author of a book that I just discovered called The Well-Dressed Bear Will Never Be Found. Jarod, how are you?
I'm great, yeah.
Now, before I turned the mic on, you were educating me on what this title is, and so even though you may be repeating yourself, I was wondering if you could tell the same to our audience.
Sure, yeah. So The Well-Dressed Bear Will Never Be Found is a graphic novel about a bear living in a city of humans. The story begins just after a sort of violent revolution's taken place. You never really find out what's happened, but the sort of city's been destroyed, and there's an agency, a sort of white-gloved agents out to sort of push out undesirables, which includes the bear and any kind of non-humans, are to move out of the city. It has a parallel narrative, so there's a text-based narrative about the well-dressed bear getting a series of phone calls that are not intended for him, and then a visual narrative where he's sort of escaping and hiding within the city, wearing a human mask, hiding in the sort of alleyways.
Now, you and I were talking also about the possible audience for this, and you were telling me you did this as part of your dissertation in education?
Yes. So this is part of my doctoral dissertation, in which I hosted some after-school comics club for a couple of years, and just working with the kids making comics there. And I was doing kind of traditional ethnographic research, collecting data, surveys, interviews, that sort of thing. And a lot of the themes that were emerging from the comics club was this idea of our comics club serving as a kind of liminal space, sort of between school, between home, where the kids felt really free to kind of do and make things. And so I was writing a series of essays, sort of academic essays, as part of my dissertation, and then alongside them, I was inspired to sort of make this story about, so as a kind of arts-based response to what I was doing in the research, about what it feels like to occupy a sort of space between. So the dissertation is sort of landscape oriented, and it's sort of the essays and the comic run sort of parallel beside one another down the comic, and you can kind of read it in any order. So
it's exciting. I wish that I could have done a comic as part of my dissertation, although my dissertation didn't have anything to do with comics.
When I started, so I did it at Penn State in the College of Education, and when I came in, I think I had suggested I wanted to study comics as a form of literacy, and at some point one of my professors was like, you can make a graphic novel, and I think in her mind she'd intended something more like a Scott McCloud book, or I don't know if you know Nick Susanis' Unflattening, something more like that, like using the form of comics. But in my head she said graphic novel, so I'm thinking, oh great, a fiction comic, that's wonderful. So I sort of started moving in that direction, reading a lot of arts-based research and looking at art making as a form of inquiry, art making as a form of generating knowledge, and so that was the direction I went in, and thankfully they seemed happy about it, or at least eager to let me do it, or at least interested enough to let me do it there. But I had a lot of support for doing that kind of work there. So,
well, let me ask you. I mean, were you doing comics before you started working on this dissertation, or comics ultimately as a result of the dissertation?
Yeah, I had started. I did my MFA in creative writing and fiction, and so I was writing fiction as part of my master's program, and on the side I had started making comics, and at some point the making comics became my primary art making form, and fiction writing became secondary. So when I was thinking about what to do after my MFA, I didn't want to do a PhD in English or creative writing. I wanted to do something different, and I had been a high school teacher before going to grad school, and I liked education, I liked learning curriculum. I decided I would apply there and look at the creation of comics as a literacy practice, and then so it sort of subsidized in many ways the making of comics, and then what was a kind of hobby-ish type thing became both the focus of my research and the form of my research.
Now I see another title here at your table, After the Night. Now, did this come after The Well-Dressed Bear?
Yes, yeah. So this is debuting here at SPX, but it's a nonfiction comic about I have a 1-year-old and a 5-year-old, and so it's about parenting while exhausted, I guess, and sort of it's a little more a little sadder, I guess. It's sort of the idea of exhaustion and lack of sleep, and how it affects you, and what those effects look like in terms of parenting, and sort of, I don't know, that being tired and stopping playing with my kids because I'm too tired, or our play turning into me just lying on the floor holding a stuffed animal, and just the sort of effects of that kind of thing. So I wanted to do a kind of reflective comic about at the time my son was 3 months old, and I think maybe I was in a very dark space at that time, sleeping very little, feeling very poorly.
Yeah, that is a dark space.
It is, yeah. And so I made this comic. I feel bad about it because I think my daughter, I don't know, I feel a little bit bad about it. Not bad enough to not make the comic, I guess, but yeah. So that's what that comic is about.
Well, if our listeners want to find out more about After the Night or The Well-Dressed Bear Will Never Be Found, how can they do so?
My website's jarodroselló.com, and I'm on Twitter at Jarod Roselló.
Okay, so they can find out about the book that way, learn more about your work. And, Jarod, thank you very much for talking with me for the Comics Alternative. I hope the rest of SPX, we only have a few hours left, is productive.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Budnik, he is the author of the Ignatz-nominated Handbook. Kevin, how are you today?
I'm really good. How are you?
Yeah. Well, I'm tired. We're coming to the end of SPX. How has the event been for you this year?
It's been really great. Sorry, my balloon is attacking my face. It's been really great. This is the third year I've been here, and each year it's gotten to feel more and more like coming back to like a very special place. Yeah, it's been fun.
Well, I got in touch with you, a few weeks ago before the event because we wanted to talk about the Ignatz nominees on an upcoming episode of the show, and you were kind enough to send me a digital copy of Handbook, and I really found that compelling. But for our listeners who may not be familiar with Handbook, describe it to our audience.
Of course. So it's a graphic memoir. I operate mostly like in autobio. So it's a story about some time in my life when I was going through treatment for disordered eating and general anxiety. And it compares and contrasts the time that I was actually in treatment and my life post. It was an outpatient thing. It wasn't like an internment thing, but it was so it's part wellness memoir, part just sort of slice of life coping thing. A lot of my stuff is anxiety focused.
Yeah, but I mean, the anxiety and the disorder doesn't consume your narrative. I mean, we get to see other sides of your life, but maybe as the anxiety every now and again intrudes upon your everyday ins and outs.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I wish I could say that it was intentional, but I think like juxtaposing the two does a good sort of service for people who understand what it's like to just live with it every day, right? Because it never goes away. It's kind of always in the background. Yeah.
Now, have you found that you have been getting more attention since you were nominated for an Ignatz?
Yeah, I would say that as soon as I was nominated, it was mostly just sort of stuff like this where people who wanted to talk about the book and find out more about my work in general. So, and it's been positive, and I'm really honored and flattered.
Because from my perspective, and you're a podcaster, which I want to talk to you about in a minute. But as a podcaster looking for new material to discuss and share with our listeners, I always look forward to the Ignatz nominations because I'm going to be much more apt to find works and creators that I wasn't aware of. Sometimes I do with the Eisners, but much more so with the Ignatz. And this year there were just quite a number of people whose work I didn't even know existed until this time around, and I appreciate that. And your work is one of those. So it's exposed me to Handbook, but you also have another book that is about to come out from 1% Press.
Yeah, 1% Press. It's called Epilogue. It's a collection of diary comics that I was doing at the same time that I was writing Handbook and drawing that. It's a lot more slice of life. It's a lot more day-to-day. I was working in a coffee shop, and it was really cold in Chicago. It's a pretty straightforward series of journal comics.
Well, now let's talk podcaster to podcaster, because right before I turned on the mic, you had told me that you were a podcaster as well, and your podcast is Tight Pencils, right. And it's a comics podcast, but it is interview-based?
Yeah, each episode I bring on an artist and talk about process, sort of the where they generate ideas and the things that they, the hurdles that they get past. Honestly, I started it with a friend, and we just wanted to find more out about artists' processes, and it kind of just turned into getting to talk to people that I really love and admire and goof around. It's it feels very unprofessional.
Well, sometimes the DIY kind of podcasts are much more enjoyable, for me at least, than the polished NPR, WNYC kind of stuff.
It depends. I'm really into podcasts. Like, I listen to maybe 40 podcasts, and I do prefer ones that have a better sound quality. And I'm such a hypocrite because I record on a field recorder. Like, I don't even, like, you have a fuzzy cover for yours, and I don't have. Mine's like a Sony. I keep it in my back pocket or whatever.
Yeah, I like my fuzzy cover. Okay, tell me some of the creators that you have talked with on your podcast.
Right before I came here, I did an episode with Carolyn Nowak, who she and I were nominated for the same award. We both lost to Tilly.
Tilly. She came away big time this year,
and it feels really good because she's a fantastic person, and I had the chance to meet her at Dink this year, and she's just so sweet and talented, and I mean, like you said, it's an honor to be nominated and everything. So. For the show, I did an episode with Carolyn, and that was really fun. I've done interviews with Mari Naomi and Liz Prince, Matt Cummings, and Lauren Jordan. I could go on for whoever I can remember if you want. But
so do you talk? Is it more? And I have to listen to this. I just found out about it when we started talking. Is it more creator to creator talking about process?
I try not to talk about my work as much, but like it creeps into it because I do like talking creator to creator and comparing and contrasting things. So,
because sometimes I wonder if on the Comics Alternative, our tagline is two guys with PhDs talking about comics, and we're both scholars in comic studies, and I wonder if maybe we come across as a little bit too stilted and academic at times, talking with the creators in a language that's a little bit different from what they're used to in talking about their art. I mean, I don't know. We haven't gotten negative feedback, but I'm a little sensitive to that at times.
I think it depends on what the listener's looking for, honestly. Like, because comics are so approachable, they can be digested in any way, and creators know what happens inside the heads of other creators, but also it's interesting to get an external take on things. Like, it is interesting to explore from an academic standpoint.
Yeah, well, here I have a podcaster on the other side of the microphone, and if our listeners wanted to find Tight Pencils, I mean, it's on the iTunes store, right?
Yeah, we're on iTunes, we're on SoundCloud, we're on Twitter at @Tight_pencils. And to find out about your comics, where would our listeners go? You would go to kevinbudnik.com. My last name is spelled Budnik, or I'm on Twitter also at Knitted Sweater. Yeah.
Well, Kevin, thank you very much for talking on the Comics Alternative, and I hope that the final hours of SPX are very good for you.
Cool, thank you so much.
I'm here with Andrea Tsurumi. She is a name that our listeners should recognize because several months ago we did a publisher spotlight on alternative comics and those in their co-op. One of those in the co-op is Hick and Hock, and one of the publications from Hick and Hock is Why Would You Do That? And I'm sitting across from the author. Andrea, how are you?
I'm quite well, thank you.
So it's good to meet you in person because we really got a kick out of your comics.
Thank you.
And so I'm wondering, tell us a little bit about the history of that collection.
Oh, the collection. Some of the comics, as I'm not sure you know, I'd made before, and I had revisited them for that book, and then some were completely new, like Hometown is the one at the end, and Cake vs. Pie was something that I kind of developed. That's a favorite. A lot of it was, so when I went to Matt Moses from Hick and Hock, who published it originally, I just kind of pitched him an idea of an anthology of short comics, and he was super open to that being whatever it was going to be, which is great because it ended up being extremely random and extremely strange, as it always was going to be. So I kind of started with a bunch of random ideas and then just went hardcore into them, and that kind of grew into the collection that it became. So some of them started with weird fascinations and obsessions, like desserts and fighting and sports, like the Yup versus Yup Nope is because the World Cup happened, and I don't really understand sports. I don't follow them, but I love all the vuvuzela madness, like crazy fandom that happens. So that's my take on sports. And Cake vs. Pie grew out of a sketchbook. Ramen grew out of a sketchbook. A lot of things kind of came from weird, just little snips and snaps that I grabbed and continued. Hometown was kind of a longer meditation on leaving home, which was, it's kind of like the newest work, and it's kind of the more, I guess it's the most complex thing I've done. So it was nice to kind of tie smaller, more funny things together with something bigger and more personal.
Now where are you located?
Right now I'm in Philadelphia. I just moved there about 5 months ago.
Well, the reason I'm asking is because before that collection, Why Would You Do That, I wasn't familiar with your comics, and I was talking with another one of our co-hosts, Gene Cannonberg, and he said, oh yeah, I love her work, and it's like, is she Chicago? Because he's up in the Chicago area, and I thought maybe you were a Chicago person.
No, I feel like I might have met him or known him through the New York Comics and Picture Story Symposium, if he's part of that.
Okay, that makes sense.
Right? Did he just move to Chicago? He's from there.
Yes, he had been living in Albany, and I think about a year ago he moved to Chicagoland.
I think it's another thing of like you meet someone at a con or you have a friend in common and it kind of blossoms. But it's very regionalized like that, which is kind of funny. Like I met a ton of people in New York, especially through the symposium and through doing cons there like Cab and Mocha and that kind of thing. And then when I moved to Philly, I realized how many of my people were in New York, and it doesn't leave with you necessarily, but it continues. So he's nice. He's great. Yeah.
So what kind of reception has Why Would You Do That been getting since its publication? It's been several months.
I guess it came out in May. I've been very pleasantly gratified to see people respond to it because the material is really random, right? So it's a victory that people will like see it, read it, and get it, or like it, since it's so strange. So hearing about it on your show felt excellent, and I've had a few people who I've met through cons like this come up to me because they've read it and seen it too. So I'm rambling here, but it's been really nice.
And I was also wondering about the sense of humor, and because it's an unusual sense of humor, very offbeat, dry. In other words, it's the kind of humor that I tend to gravitate toward, and I love that wry tone. And I would hope that resonates with readers.
I guess, right? I mean, it's a very personal thing, right? Like what your sense of humor is very much like your fingerprint, right? I'm an absurdist. I really like starting, and a literalist in a weird way, even though a lot of the things I draw are really surreal and out there. In some way, I take humor very seriously, and I take very serious things very comedically. So I'll usually start with things that I observe people doing. This human behavior is ridiculous, and then kind of extrapolate to an absurd degree. So a lot of my humor ends up going to that area, but it usually starts in something observed or something localized in real life, which is weird when you end up having like cakes and pies fighting each other. But I think a lot about war and like the Civil War, and I'm not like a Civil War history buff at all, but I'm very fascinated by that era and a lot of things that happened, like the medicine. So that comes through. You know, it's a very serious take on something really dumb. I guess that's a good way of encapsulating some of the book.
You know, I like the way you put that, a serious take on something sort of dumb. And you know, you mentioned cake versus pie. I remember when I was reading through that book, preparing for that episode earlier in the year, I think I was in the same room with my wife as I was reading it, and she doesn't read comics, but I specifically showed her that comic because I knew that she would get it.
Oh, thank you. It started out as doodles in my sketchbook, and then just kind of expanded. And this is nerdy, but the end panel of all the slices of pie is based on like a Civil War photograph of cut off severed limbs. It's called A Day's Work. It's really gross.
So you are fascinated by war history?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, but in like a weird way. Like I was telling Gil Roth, like I don't know the battles, like I don't know the specific, head count from Shiloh and the order of certain things, but I love the little human touches of history, not on like the grand presidential scale, but like the fact that there was a Civil War photographer, I think his name was Stephen, I forget his first name, is Gardner, who would fake photos for his readership back home because he wanted it to be more dramatic. And somebody in the 70s went back and looked through all of his archive and realized it's the same gun, or like it's the same corpse being dragged from position to position and kind of propped up to, lend, drama to a photo. We're like, oh my God, this guy was totally faking, all these, storied historical photographs. It's just so human, right?
Yeah.
Right? Like.
Yeah. So what are you working on now?
I just finished handing in a children's book for Houghton Mifflin Harcourt. It's called Accident. And
Accident?
Accident, exclamation point. That'll come out in fall 2017. So that was my big project for the year. And I'm working on a second book that will be coming out in 2018 as well, but I don't know what that one is yet.
Okay. So Accident is, you said it's a children's book? Okay, so not a comic, but a children's book.
Well, it's very comics influenced, like all the stuff that I do, but it is a picture book for mainstream. It comes out with, it's being published by Houghton Mifflin Harcourt. And it's about an armadillo that screws up and freaks the hell out, and it's full of like crazy chaotic energy, very similar to my comics, but for kids.
Wow, an armadillo, that would go over well where I am in Texas.
Oh yeah, do you get a lot of them there?
Yeah, it's a rarity that you see live ones, but I have seen live ones scurrying around. I usually see them on the side of the road, unfortunately, lifeless.
Right. Oh God, and when they get squished, they get squished.
Yeah.
I hear they have leprosy.
I don't know. I've never communicated with one about that phenomena. So, and I've only seen like a couple from a distance, and usually very early in the morning when there's not much movement going on.
Oh, that's adorable. I chose her because they just seem like a perfect anxious animal. Anything that has an enormous physical tell when it freaks out, like one of those lizards that pops its frill, or like a pufferfish or an armadillo, and they roll into the ball. as an anxious person, I can relate to needing some sort of like gigantic physical freak out.
Now, I mean, as you pointed out, there are quite a number of similarities between paneling in comics and children's books or picture books. Had you done picture books in the past?
My whole basis and interest in telling stories visually and combining words and pictures has started with a joint love of comics and picture books. Like, it's always been children's books and picture books and comics for me growing up. So I've been making things that are more children's book oriented, I guess, and then other comics things like throughout the last 10 years or so, and then throughout my MFA. But this is the most like formal, actual declaration of an actual children's book I am making. But I have been doing art that veers that way in addition to the comics.
Do you see yourself doing more picture books in the future?
Oh, I would love to. I legitimately love picture books and love comics.
Yeah, I mean, I just love... I don't teach it, but I've taken courses in children's literature, and I love just the feel of picture books. I mean, children's books in general, but specifically picture books.
Oh.
And the way that they look, the larger pictures.
Oh, it's great. It's the best visual sandbox. That's why people, I think it's like the same way people really love early 20th century comics and the newspaper comics with the enormous format and the crazy like formal experimentation that people would do. It's because it's 32 pages and because it's for a different kind of an audience, sometimes it would seem like it's a simpler idea and that's less complicated, but it's actually more complicated because it's smaller or it's more clarified, I guess. So as like a practical exercise, it's really interesting. As a narrative exercise and a visual narrative exercise, it's really cool. You can do a lot of really cool stuff with it. Yeah, that's the profundity I'm leaving you with.
Yeah, really cool. But you're going to continue with comics, right?
Oh, yeah, God, yes. I love it. I love the people. I love the form. I love the storytelling possibilities. It's awesome to be able to work in both things, really.
Well, Andrea, thank you very much for talking with the Comics Alternative, and we love your book. Keep doing it, and good luck with the future work.
Well, thank you so much for talking to me.
She is the author of Black is the Color, which we discussed several months ago on our webcomic show, but she has a very, very new book out called Laid Waste. How you doing, Julia?
I'm doing great. We're on, it's Sunday afternoon, so it's day 2 of the show, and I just had lunch and I'm just coasting, feeling good, feeling great.
Yeah, for the last few hours of the con.
Yeah. And sales have been really good. People are interested in my new book, and I even sold one of these big Kramers, so I'm glad I schlepped that out.
Yeah, so you're in Kramer as well?
Yeah, that came out over the summer, I guess, and I have a one-page comic in that. And it's a great big book, and it's $45, so I'm happy to sell one.
Yeah. Now, I discovered your comic through Study Group, which originally Black is the Color came out there, but then Fantagraphic came out with the print edition. But you have other books up on Study Group. Are you going to continue doing the webcomics on Study Group, or do you find yourself working in the hard copy format now?
Well, I always do print comics, and like Black is the Color, I made a zine and published it kind of with I wrote it and drew it with the intention of making a print version, but I wanted to put something on Study Group, so I put it on there first before the print version came out. But it was drawn to be a print book, and I self-published it in zine format, and then Fantagraphics published that. And then I have a couple of other Study Group comics, Phosphorus and River of Tears, which are both originally printed in my self-published anthology Blacklight, which is out of print now.
And you also had a comic in last year's Best American Comics, correct?
Yeah, that's true. It was I'm trying to remember now. Oh, it was Palmash.
And so it's like over the past year I've been noticing you more and more, and you've been out there. It's just when I first notice you, then I start seeing your work in a variety of different areas. So it's like expanding my awareness just because I see you for the first time.
That's good. I'm achieving saturation, I guess.
Yes, and saturation can be good in this way.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about Laid Waste, the new book.
Okay, it's another kind of like short graphic novel, like Black is the Color. It's about 80 pages long. Sorry. It's about 80 pages long. It takes place in the 14th century. It's about the bubonic plague in a certain village and like the people who live there and how they deal with the people around them being sick and dying, and what that's like for the people who survive, and how they interpret their not getting sick or having to deal with what's going on around them.
So, you're right, about the same length as Black is the Color. Do you enjoy working with shorter formats? Do you see yourself working with more longer form storytelling in the future?
I don't know. I really like doing short stories. Like, I have a lot of zines mini comics that I self-published that are like between 15 and 30 pages, and I like that length a lot. And I guess these are Black is the Color and Laid Waste are the two longest things that I've done, and I feel pretty good about that length. I haven't really thought about doing anything longer than that. That feels like a lot to me, but hopefully as I become more mature and diligent, it'll get easier for me to do longer work. I was just on a panel with some other younger Fantagraphics artists with Ben Mara and Simon Hanselman, and we were talking about how when you first make a comic, like it's just appalling how much work it is, and you're like if you have something long planned, you maybe kind of like drop off because it's just so much work and it's so meticulous, and it's like, what is the point of this? And then like as you keep doing it, it gets easier, and then it's just like all you want to do. So I'm hoping that as I keep making comics, it'll get easier and easier for me to do longer work.
I've noticed that you also have a penchant for fictional works that are period pieces. Do you particularly like storytelling in that way?
I basically only write fiction. And I've done a few pieces that are contemporary. River of Tears is, and Too Dark to See, and I'm really interested in history, and sometimes there's things that I want to write about that, like if I'm going to write a comic about the bubonic plague, it doesn't really make sense to set it in modern times. Or if I want to have a comic about, Black is the Color takes place. There's a ship, like a galleon, and, maybe you could make it like modern sailors on a modern ship, but it doesn't make sense to, like, a modern sailor wouldn't just get lost, like, people would go looking for him, or, it's harder to explain it, whereas, like, if it takes place in this kind of historical time, then there's less that I have to set up ahead of time. Like, well, here are all the reasons why this could happen. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay, so Laid Waste, is it out now? Was this its debut at SPX?
It debuts at CXC next month.
Oh, okay, so next month. That's right, you're going to be at CXC. Because my colleague on the podcast, Andy Kunka, is going to be there, and I think he mentioned wanting to see you.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I'm going to be a special guest at CXC. I'm really excited.
Okay, so it's debuting there. So this is about to come out. Are you working on anything right now? Anything else?
Well, right now I'm working on my piece for Mirror Mirror 2, which is an anthology from 2D Cloud that Shanti Collins and I are curating together. And my piece for it is that I'm kind of redrawing and translating descriptions from a book of early modern French heraldry. So I'm pretty excited about that. I'm almost done with that. And then I have a sequel to my book Flesh and Bone that's written and penciled, and it just needs to be inked. And I'm kind of like partway done with that, so I'm going to get back to that and hopefully publish that early next year.
Wow, through Fantagraphics?
No, that'll be a different publisher.
Okay. Well, listen, good luck with all that work. Thank you for taking the time and talking with me for the Comics Alternative, and I look forward to reading Laid Waste.
Yeah, thank you so much for stopping by.
16, and I didn't think that I would get to meet him this time around, but I was lucky. As I'm walking one last time through the hall, I ran into Josh Cotter. He is a name that our listeners should recognize because we have discussed his book, Not Away, earlier in the year. Josh, how has SPX been for you?
It's been a great show. It's always worth coming out to it. As an artist, my hope is to just at least break even, and that's been achieved. So it's and more than anything, just being out here and being around so many great cartoonists, and it's a great attendance too. It's a lot of great energy in the crowd, and it's always worth coming out to SPX.
Now, I notice you're here right near the very front of a main entrance, or right next to a main entrance. How's the traffic been for you, and in terms of the attention you're getting?
Yesterday was great. Today's been a little bit slower, but I don't know. I've been at different spots in the hall. This is my 9th SPX. I think I counted them earlier, and it's. I don't know. I think no matter where I am in this center, in the conference center, business is about the same, really. So
what's been the interest of Not Away, because that's come out several months ago? What kind of reaction has that been getting, both at SPX and elsewhere?
Well, so far, it seems positive. It's been getting primarily positive critical response. It's been on a couple Best of 2016 so far lists. It's got the Ignatz nominee. So, I can only take that as assurance that I should keep doing the series. But response so far, like at shows, a few people that have read it, they seem to be really excited about future volumes. But a lot of people are just purchasing it for the first time. So it's more like books with Skyscrapers of the Midwest or Driven by Lemons, where people come by and talk more about their experience reading the book and what kind of connection they made with it. And it's great. I'm very fortunate that 8 years after this book comes out, it's Skyscrapers of the Midwest. People still react to it. People still talk about it, and I'm very fortunate that I'm in I've created something that has touched people like that.
Yeah, I know my introduction to your work was Skyscrapers of the Midwest, and so I was excited to see Not Away when it was originally solicited. Now you've mentioned a couple of times in the brief time we've talked that this is the first volume, and you and I have talked off mic, and we corresponded earlier this year that when we reviewed Not Away on the podcast, we weren't aware that this was the first volume of, a 7-volume planned series?
It is going to be 7 volumes, yeah. I did my best to promote it as a 7-volume series, and I guess my reach isn't very far because there has been a bit of confusion, but it will be 7 volumes, and I am currently a third of the way through the second volume. It's going a little slower right now because I just had a daughter back in April.
Congratulations!
Thank you. And it's I've had to relearn how to get back. My routine's been disrupted a little bit, but I'm getting back to a regular routine now.
Well, what's the genesis of Not Away?
I think the first thing that really I always have all these disparate ideas, but the thing that really got me thinking was a few years ago, mid 2000s, I read an article about how they think in our lifetime they'll be able to draw the human self, the human consciousness out of the mind if necessary, and put it in like an electronic hard drive. And it got me to thinking, what is self? If you're able to take what we consider ourselves to be and convert it into data, binary data, even though we don't exactly know the purpose of consciousness or the source of consciousness, we're somehow able to at least identify it and withdraw it from the human body, and that's kind of what got me started thinking about it. What would the purpose of that even be? It's the human need, the human desire for something beyond our mortality, and that's kind of where Not Away started from.
So you say that you're in the process of finishing up, or soon to be finishing up, the second volume?
It's going to be a while. I'm about a third of the way through, but that's after working on it for 9 months. So I'm hoping by sometime in 2018 the second volume will be out.
Okay, so this is going to be a long-haul narrative. And one of the things that I noticed looking at the hard copy is you do have the one on the spine. Do you plan for the rest of the volumes to have a similar look to where when they're sitting on a bookcase when you're done, there'll be this uniformity?
There's going to be, with 7 volumes, it's going to be the Roy Chipa, the Spectrum. So the next volume will have a orange color, and each book will have its own protagonist, so it'll have a different cover, glue drawing of the main character on it. So when they're on the shelf, they will all hold together, except I do have plans for one of the volumes to make things a little bit different, to mess with the OCD readers, and it will serve a narrative purpose as well.
Oh, okay. So we have that to look forward to. Now, this is kind of a stupid question, I guess, in light of this gargantuan project, but are you currently working on anything else at the moment?
With this project as large as it is, I am not. I do the occasional freelance illustration job, but I do them very rarely. Between my children and the books, it's all I've got time for right now. I would possibly do some anthology stuff in the future, maybe some small, shorter works, but at the moment my focus is on Nottoway.
Yeah, this is just your work right now. Yeah. So our listeners, if they want to find out, not just about Nottoway, but also get your previous books, The Skyscrapers of the Midwest and Driven by Lemons, where can they get those books outside of, let's say, Amazon?
I have a big cartel store where I sell all my books. It's just jwcotter.bigcartel.com. Or Fantagraphics and Ad House both have their own web stores as well. So it would be on comic shops beyond Amazon. If you buy it from me, I can draw on it for you. So there's that.
Well, Josh, thank you very much for talking with us on the Comics Alternative. I'm very glad to meet you in person.
My pleasure. It's nice to meet you too.
So there you have it, my Small Press Expo conversations with Theora Kvitka, Sophie Goldstein, Melanie Gillman, Carolyn Nowak, Zack Soto, Jarod Roselló, Kevin Budnik, Andrea Tsurumi, Julia Gfrörer, and Joshua Cotter. And this is the last of our episodes that we recorded at Small Press Expo this year. I want to thank everyone for taking the time and talking with me while I was at the event. I had a great time, and I look forward to doing that next year. And if you want to find great discounts on the books written by many of the people I talked to while at SPX, then head on over to the website of our sponsor, dcbservice.com. That's right, you can't find better prices than those offered by Discount Comic Book Service. And after you do get your comics there, get in touch with us and let us know what you think about our SPX interviews. If you go to the website, comicsalternative.com, you'll find that you can leave us a voice message through the wonders of SpeakPipe, which is a really easy program to use. Or you can call us the old-fashioned way. Our phone number is 415-3-COMICS. That's 415-326-6427. You can also email us. We're 2guys@comicsalternative.com, or you can contact me directly at derek@comicsalternative.com. You can also find us all over social media, such as on Twitter, Facebook, Tumblr, Instagram, Google+, Goodreads, Pinterest, and YouTube. Just go to those places and find us. You can subscribe to the podcast through iTunes. You can stream us on Stitcher. You can find us on TuneIn, on Spotify, and on iHeartRadio. And if you're an Android user, on Google Play Music. But you can find every single one of our podcast episodes, as well as the reviews and the comics-related commentary that we post on our blog, simply by going to our website, comicsalternative.com. I hope you've enjoyed all of the episodes we recorded while at Small Press Expo this year. I know I had a good time talking with a lot of different people for this show, and we've got a lot more lined up on the Comics Alternative in the weeks to come. So until those episodes, take care.